Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story.
Okay, welcome to Wayback Wednesday, the last one for the month of May. This one is an interesting one, maybe, if you like cars. This one is from the manufacturers of my favorite dream car. Maybe someday we'll see. Are you ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I'll support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. All right, so we've got 8 cars. Boom, cars. We're talking about cars today. Here we go. All right, so we got Stace, we got Big Ben, we got Voice, we got Elling, DJ, Principal, Alice, Sylvia, Pinned, Consume, Scully, She Stole, Tammy, Chronicles, Win, Aries, Sheena, Elaine, there's Jacob, there's Capin, there's Mike's Garden, Zoll, Trip, there's Darman, there's Ron, there's Wanda, there's Rock, Mindfolk, Garfield, or Garf. Oh, and Rock is our winner. Hang on, Rock. One moment.
Hey, ready, girl?
Okay, dokies, I'll be here. All right, so our winner is Rock the Boat. A Brit and a Yank, I can read. A Brit and a Yank who love to travel and with a preference for cruising. So this is a cruising channel. Lots of cruising information here. They got some shorts. And they got some lives. Well, had some lives. They haven't posted in a while. As you see, they don't post a ton. It looks like I'm past due, so I need to get that cut up. But they're good if you're interested in cruising, traveling. It's a good channel to go to. Like, share, comment. All right, bearded historian, tell them some things that's semi-interesting. Not too interesting.
Not too interesting.
No, we don't want them to pay attention.
No, don't pay attention because this will just bore the heck out of you. Anyway, today's topic deals about the founding of a company that you might say it kind of got its birthplace in a war, a little before it happened. This happy little company was Volkswagen, 88 years ago. Originally, it was established in the 1930s, 1937 to be precise, by the German Labor Front, part of the Strength Through Joy program in Berlin. Now, early in the 1930s, cars were a luxury, and most Germans could only afford nothing more elaborate than a motorcycle, and only one German out of 50 owned a car. They were kind of a status item. If you think about the Model Ts that were being constructed and basically turned out like hotcakes, it was definitely a different situation. Now, seeking a potential new market, some car makers began tinkering with independent people's cars projects. Mercedes had a 170H, BMW had the 3-15, the Adler had the Autobahn, Steyr 55, and the Hanomag 1.3 liter, among others. But the growing trend was not nascent. Bella Bereni, a pioneering automotive engineer, is credited as already having conceived the basic design during the mid-1920s. Joseph Gans developed the standard Superior, going as far as advertising it as the German Volkswagen. In Germany, the company Haunemag mass-produced a 2-10 PS Kohlesbrot, a small, cheap rear-ended car from 1925 to 1928. And in Czechoslovakia, the Hans Woodwinka designed the Tatra T77, a very popular car among the German elite, was becoming smaller, more affordable with each revision. Well, this name ought to ring a bell by more than a few car enthusiasts. Ferdinand Porsche, a well-known designer for high-end vehicles and race cars, had been trying for years to get a manufacturer interested in a small car suitable for a family. He built a car named the Volksauto from the ground up in 1933 using many popular ideas and several of his own, putting together a car with an air-cooled rear engine, torsion bar suspension, and a beetle shape, the front bonnet rounded for better aerodynamics. This was needed because it had a small engine. Now in 1934, with many of the above projects still in development or early stages of production, a very interesting name came along. You might have heard of him, just maybe, Adolf Hitler.
No.
He became involved ordering the production of a basic vehicle capable of transporting 2 adults and 3 children up to 62 miles per hour. Now, he wanted a car every German family would be able to afford. The People's Car would be available through a savings plan at about 990 Reichsmarks, or $396 in 1938 money, about the price of a small motorcycle. Now, at that time, the average income for a person was about 32 Reichsmarks a week. Well, it soon became apparent that the private industry could not turn out a car for only 990 Reichsmarks. Thus, Hitler chose to sponsor an all-new state-owned factory using Ferdinand Porsche's design, with some of Hitler's design suggestions, including an air-cooled engine so nothing could freeze. The intention was that German families could buy the car through a savings scheme. The 5 marks a week you must set aside if your own car eventually paid into. However, the project was not commercially viable, and only government support was able to keep it afloat. When the outbreak of war in 1939, none of the participants of the savings scheme had ever received a car. Finally, about 1950, a lawsuit was issued that, after 12 years of trial, ultimately provided a credit of 12% off the list price of a new VW base model, or 5 times less than the value paid into the savings scheme. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So he's for entering a scheme, I guess.
Right. Well, prototypes of the car were called the KDF wagon, from the German term Kraft durch Freude, which means strength through joy, appeared from 1938 onwards. The first cars had been produced in Stuttgart. The car already had its distinctive round shape and air-cooled, flat-4 rear-mounted engine. The VW car was just one of many programs, which included things such as tours and outings. The prefix Volks, or People's, was not just applied to cars, but also to other products in Germany. The Volkswagen radio receiver, for instance. 1937, on May the 28th, Gesellschaft zur Vortreibung der Deutschen Volkswagen MBH, the company for the preparation of the German Volkswagen Limited, or Gutzwort for short, was established in Berlin by the Dutch Arbeitsfront, the national labor organization for the Nazi Party. More than a year later, on September the 16th, 1938, it was renamed to the Volkswagen Work GmbH. Well, Erwin Komada, the long-standing auto union chief designer, part of Porsche's hand-picked team, developed the car body as a prototype, which was recognizably the Beetle as known today. It's one of the first cars designed with the aid of a wind tunnel, the method used for German aircraft design since the early 1920s. The car's designs were put through rigorous tests, and achieved a record-breaking 1,000,000 miles of testing before being deemed finished. Well, the construction of the new factory started in May of 1938 in the new town of Status KDF Wagons, renamed Wolfsburg after the war, which had been purpose-built for factory workers. This factory had only produced a handful of cars by the time the war started in 1939. None were actually delivered to any holders of the completed savings stamp books, though one cabriolet was presented to Hitler on the 20th of April in 1944, his 55th birthday.
Woo!
Well, war would change the production of military vehicles. The Type 82 Kubelwagen, or bucket car, utility vehicle, the VW's most common wartime model, and the amphibious Schwebwagen, manufactured for German forces. One of the first foreigners to drive a Volkswagen was the American war correspondent Ernie Pyle, who had the use of a captured Volkswagen for a few days after the Allied victory in Tunisia in May of 1943. As was common with much of the production in Nazi Germany during the war, slave labor was utilized at the Volkswagen plant from the Abernsdorf concentration camp. The company would admit in 1998 using 15,000 slaves during the war effort. German historians estimate that 80% of Volkswagen's wartime workforce was slave labor. Now, many of these slaves were reported to have been supplied from the concentration camps upon request from plant managers. Lawsuits filed in 1998 by survivors for restitution for the forced labor. Volkswagen would set up a voluntary restitution fund. Now, in April 1945, the heavily bombed factory was captured by the United States Armed Forces and subsequently handed over to the British, within whose occupation zone the town and the factory fell. The factory was placed under the control of the British Army officer Major Ivan Hurst, a civilian military governor with the occupying forces. At first, one plan was use it for military vehicle maintenance and possibly dismantle and ship it to Britain. Since it had been used for military production, words, a political animal rather than a commercial enterprise, technically making it liable for destruction under the terms of the Potsdam Agreement, the equipment could have been salvaged as war reparations. Allied dismantling policy changed in late 1946 to mid-1947, though heavy industry continued to be dismantled until 1951. Well, one of the factory's wartime wagon cars had been taken to the factory for repairs and abandoned there. Hearst had it repainted green and demonstrated to the British Army headquarters. Short of light transport in September of 1945, the British Army was persuaded to place a vital order for 20,000 cars. However, production facilities had been massively disrupted as there was a refugee crisis at and around the factory, and
What?
some parts. No. Some parts, like carburetors, were unavailable. Hearst and his general assistant Heinrich Nordhoff, who went on to run the Wolfsburg facility after the military government ended in 1949, helped to stabilize the acute social situation while simultaneously reestablishing production. Hearst, for example, used his engineering experience to arrange the manufacture of carburetors, the original producers being effectively lost in the Soviet zone. The first 200 cars went into personnel from the occupying forces and to the Postal Service. Some British service personnel were allowed to take their Beetles back to the UK when they were demobilized. Now, the postal or industrial plans for Germany set out rules that governed what industries Germany was allowed to retain. These rules set German car production at a maximum of 10% of the 1936 car production. By 1946, the factory produced 1,000 cars a month, even though it was still in disrepair. Owing to roof and window damage, production had to stop when it rained. The company had to barter new vehicles for steel for production. Now, the car of the town changed their name to Volkswagen and Wolfsburg, respectively, and the productions increased. It was still unclear what was to become of the factory. It was offered to representatives from the American, Australian, British, and French motor industries, who all rejected it. After an inspection of the plant, Sir William Rootes, head of the British Rootes Group, told Hearst the project would fail within 2 years, and that the car was quite unattractive to the average motor car buyer. It is too ugly and too noisy. If you think you're going to build cars in this place, you're a bloody fool, young man. The official report said to build a car commercially would be a complete uneconomic enterprise.
Oh, completely.
What a concept. 88 years going. Now, Ford representatives were equally critical. In 1948, the British offered the Volkswagen Company to Ford free of charge. Henry Ford II, the son of Edsel Ford, traveled to West Germany for discussions. Heinz Nordhoff was also present, as well as Ernest Breech, chairman of the board for Ford. Henry Ford II looked at Breech for his opinion, and Breech said, "Mr. Ford, I don't think what we're being offered here is worth a damn." Ford passed on the offer, leaving Volkswagen to rebuild itself under Nordhoff's leadership. Now, you think about Ford, and, they have their ways of doing things post-war. They went through several design models. Volkswagen, from 1948, became pretty much an important element, symbolically and economically, of West German regeneration. Heinrich Nordhoff, a former senior manager at Opel, who had overseen civilian and military vehicle production in the 30s and 40s, was recruited to run the factory in 48. In 49, Major Hearst left the company, now reformed as a trust controlled by the West German government and the government of the state of Lower Saxony. The Beetle sedan, or people's car, Volkswagen, is the Type 1. Apart from the introduction of the Volkswagen Type 2 commercial vehicle, van, pickup, and camper, and the VW Carman Ghia sports car, Nordhoff pursued the one-model policy until shortly before his death in 1968. Well, Volkswagens were first exhibited and sold in the United States in 1949, but sold only 2 units in America the first year.
Aw, $2.
$2. On entry to the U.S. market, the VW was briefly sold as a Victory Wagon. Volkswagen of America was formed in April of 1955 to standardize sales and service in the United States. Production of the Type 1 Volkswagen Beetle increased dramatically over the years, the total reaching 1 million in 1955. In 6 years, they went from 2 to that. That's crazy.
Everybody's like, I want Bug.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, that was one of the catches, And the fact is that you look at the fact that you could swap parts so easy. If you needed a piece from the 49 for a 55, it wasn't that hard. Now, the UK's first official Volkswagen importer, Colburn Garages of Ripley, Surrey, started business with importing parts from the models brought home by soldiers returning from Germany. Canadian Motors Limited brought in Canada's first shipment of Volkswagens on the 10th of July, 1952, shipping order 143075. The order consisted of 12 vehicles, 3 Model 11Cs, a black graded sand color, 11 GS, a chestnut brown, and 2 azure blues, 24A-M51s in red, a 21A in blue, a 21A in blue, and a 22A in beige color, and 1 ambulance. Now, Volkswagens were seen in Canada for the first time at the Canadian National Exhibition in August of 1952, and were accepted enthusiastically. At least one Type 2 bus from this order still exists.
Bus.
It is currently in France undergoing restoration. Now, the first shipment of Volkswagens to Canada reached Toronto in early December 1952. At least one Type 1 from this first shipment still exists. It was driven on a nationwide tour for Volkswagen in Canada's 60th year of business festivities in 2012. Now, in 1955, sales warranted the building of a Volkswagen plant in a 32-acre site in the Scarborough's Golden Mile. To this, a 60,000 square foot building with administration, showroom, service, repairs, and parts was built in 1957 with storage for $4 million worth of parts.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, in 1959, Volkswagen started production at a plant near Paulo in Brazil. Volkswagen do Brazil was accused of spying on workers during the time of the military dictatorship in the 1970s and informing police of oppositional activities. In 1976, mass arrests occurred and some VW employees were tortured.
Uh-oh.
In 1979, Brazilian VW workers traveled to Wolfsburg to inform the CEO in person. In 2015, activists and former VW employees in Brazil spoke out in public, accused the company's silence about the persecution of its workers. In fall of 2016, VW commissioned an expert review of the situation due in 2017. Now, on the 22nd of August 1960, Volkswagen Work GmbH was renamed Volkswagen Work AG. Sales soared throughout the 1960s, peaking at the end of the decade thanks to the famous advertising campaigns by New York advertising agency Doyle Dane Bernbach. Led by art director Helmut Kern and copywriters Julia Koenig and Bob Levinson, Volkswagen advertisements became as popular as the car, using crisp layouts and witty copy to lure the younger, sophisticated consumers with whom the car became associated. Even though it was almost universally known as the Beetle or the Bug, it was never officially labeled as such by the manufacturer, instead referred to it as the Type 1. Although the car was becoming outdated, during the 60s and early 70s, American exports, innovative advertising, and the growing reputation for reliability helped production figures surpass the levels of the previous record holder, the aforementioned Ford Model T. On the 17th of February of 1972, the 15,707,034th Beetle was sold.
Ooh.
Volkswagen could now claim the world production record for the most produced single make of car in history. And by 1973, that total production was over 16 million. Now, to commemorate its passing of the Ford Model T record sales mark and its victories in the Baja 1000 Mexican races from 67 to 71, Volkswagen produced its first limited edition Beetle. It was marked as the Baja Champion SE in the United States and the Marathon Super Beetle in the rest of the world. It featured a Marathon Blau metallic blue paint, steel pressed 10-spoke 15-inch magnesium alloy wheels, a commemorative metal plate mounted on the glove box, and a certificate of authenticity presented to the original purchaser.
Interesting.
Yeah. Dealer installed options for the limited edition Super Beetles included the following: white stripes running the length of the rocker panel, a special shifter knob, bumper overriders, tapered exhaust tips, fake walnut inserts in the dashboard, behind the steering wheel and the glove box cover, as well as Bosch fog lights mounted on the front bumper. Now, the 1961 Type 1 Beetle had a 36 horsepower, 1200cc, four-cylinder air-cooled flat four, opposed overhead valve engine made of aluminum alloy block and heads. By 66, the Type 1 came with a 1300cc engine. In 67, and Type 1 had a 1500cc engine, and in 1600 cc's in 1970. The air-cooled engine lost favor in the United States with markets with the advent of a blended petrol and smog controls.
Ooh.
These air-controlled engines were commonly tuned to the fuel-rich in order to control engine overheating. This led to excessive carbon monoxide emissions. The VW production equipment was eventually moved to Mexico, where vehicle emissions were not regulated. Beetles were popular on the West Coast, where the limited capacity cabin heating was less inconvenient. Beetles were popularized in the U.S. West Coast as beach buggies and dune buggies.
Yeah.
The VW expanded its product line in 1961 with the introduction of 4 Type 3 models: the Carman Ghia, the Notchback, the Fastback, and variant, based on the new Type 3 mechanical underpinnings. The name Squareback was used in the United States for the variant. In 1969, a larger Type 4, the 411 and 412 models were introduced, and these differed substantially from previous models, with the notable introduction of the monocue unibody construction, the option of a fully automatic transmission, electronic fuel injection, and a sturdier power plant. In 1964, Volkswagen acquired the Auto Union, and in 1969, NSU Motorwork AG, the former company, owned the historic Audi brand, which had disappeared after the Second World War. The VW ultimately merged Auto Union and NSU to create the modern Audi company, and would go on to develop it as a luxury vehicle marquee. The purchase of Auto Union and NSU was a pivotal point in Volkswagen's history, as both companies yielded the technological expertise that proved necessary for VW to survive when the demand for its air-cooled models went into decline. Now, Volkswagen again would add a Super Beetle Type 131 to its lineup in 1971. This Type 131 differed from the standard Beetle in the use of a McPherson strut front suspension instead of usual torsion bars. The Super Beetle featured a new hooded, padded dash and curved windshield. From the 1973 model year on up, rack and period steering replaced the recirculating ball steering gears in the model year 1975 and up. The front of the car was stretched 2 inches to allow the spare tire to lie flat, and the combination of these two features increased the usable front luggage space. In 1973, Volkswagen introduced the military-themed Type 181, or Trekker in Europe, Thing in America, recalling the wartime Type 82. The military version was produced for NATO-era German Army during the Cold War years of 1970 to 1979. The U.S. Thing version was sold for only 2 years, 1973 and 1974. By late 1972, Volkswagen had decided to cancel the nearly finished Type 266, a product for mid-engineered cars, to replace the Beetle, and focus on front-wheel drive, water-cooled cars. Rudolf Leading, recently made head of Volkswagen, cited noise, heat, and servicing problems with the mid-engine layout, as well as difficulty in making it a station wagon. Now, Volkswagen was in serious trouble by 1973. The Type 3 and Type 4 models had sold in much smaller numbers than the Beetle, and the NSU-based K70 also failed to sell. Beetle sales had started to decline rapidly in European and North American markets. The company knew the Beetle production had to end, but faced its conundrum of how to replace it. VW's ownership of the Audi Auto Union proved beneficial. Its expertise in front-wheel drive and water-cooled engines would help Volkswagen produce a credible Beetle successor. Audi influence paved the way for this new generation of Volkswagens: the Passat, the Scirocco, the Golf, and the Polo. Well, first in the series was the Volkswagen Passat, or Dasher in the U.S. Dasher and Dancer, no, just kidding.
Woo!
Introduced in 1973 with a fastback version of the Audi 80, using many of the same identical body and mechanical parts. Estate wagon versions were available in many markets, and in Europe, the estate wagon version dominated market share for many years. In the spring of 1974, the Scirocco followed. The coupe was designed by Giordano Girardo, based on the platform of not yet released Golf. It was built at Carbon due to the capacity constraints at Volkswagen. This pivotal model emerged at the Volkswagen Golf in 1974, marketed in the United States and Canada as the Rabbit for the first generation. Fifth generation in 2006 and 2009, its angular styling, again by Giorgetto Gerardo, its design followed the trends of many small family cars set by the 1959 Mini. The Golf had transversely mounted water-cooled engine in the front, driving in front wheels, and a hatchback, a format that has been dominated in the market segment ever since. I remember some of those years, and it was so crazy because it's like everybody had almost the exact same car on the market.
Right.
Whether you were Ford, Chevy, Volkswagen, Toyota, Hyundai, they all were like the same color too. How do we solve our problem in identifying our car? Dangling a koala.
Right.
But, Beetle production at Wolfsburg ended upon the Golf's introduction. It continued at smaller numbers in other German factories, Hanover, and Emden until 1978. But the mainstream production shifted to Brazil and Mexico. In '75, the Volkswagen Polo followed. It was rebadged the Audi 50, which was soon discontinued in '78. The Polo became the base of the Volkswagen Derby, which was introduced in 1977. The Derby, for all intents and purposes, was a three-box design of the Polo. After a second model generation, the Derby was discontinued in 1985, although the body style lived on in the former Polo Classic Polo Salon until 1991. Well, the Passat, Scirocco, Golf, and Polo shared many characteristics defining features as well as parts and engines. They built the basis for Volkswagen's turnaround. Now, while Volkswagen's range of cars soon became similar to that of other large European car makers, the Golf had been the mainstay of the Volkswagen lineup since its introduction and the mechanical basis for many other cars of the company. There have been 8 generations of the Volkswagen Golf, the first of which was produced from the summer of 1974 till the autumn of 1983, sold as the Rabbit in the United States and Canada, and as the Carib in Latin America. Now, its chassis also spawned the Volkswagen Scirocco Sport Coupe, Jetta, saluted sedan, the Volkswagen Golf Cabriolet Convertible, and the Volkswagen Caddy pickup. Now, North American production of the Rabbit commenced in the Volkswagen Westmoreland assembly plant near New Stanton, Pennsylvania in 1978. It would be produced in the United States as the Rabbit until the spring of 1984. The second generation Golf hatchback Jetta sedan ran from October 1983 until the autumn of 1991, and a North American version produced at Westmoreland Assembly went for sale at the start of the '85 model year. The production numbers of that first generation Golf has continued to grow annually in South Africa as the City Golf, with only major modifications to the interior, engine, and chassis using tooling relocated from the New Stanton, Pennsylvania plant when that site began to build the second generation car. So if we're going to use parts here, there, and everywhere, just keep shipping them to another plant. Now, in the 1980s, Volkswagen sales in the United States fell dramatically, and in Canada, despite the success of models like the Golf elsewhere. Sales in the United States were 293,000 in 1980, but by '84 they were down to 177,000. Now, the introduction of the second generation Golf, the GTI, and Jetta models helps Volkswagen briefly in North America. Motor Trend named the GTI its Car of the Year in 1985, and Volkswagen rose in the J.D. Power Buyer Satisfaction Ratings to 8th place in 1985, up from 22nd a year earlier. Now, VW's American sales broke 200,000 in '85 and '86 before resuming the downward trend from earlier in the decade. Chairman Carl Hahn decided to expand the company elsewhere, mostly developing countries, and the New Stanton, Pennsylvania factory would close on the 14th of July, 1988. Meanwhile, 4 years after signing a cooperation agreement with the Spanish car maker SEAT in 1982, Hahn expanded the company by purchasing a majority share of SEAT up to 75% by the end of 1986, which VW bought outright in 1990. On the 4th of July, 1985, Volkswagen Work AG was renamed to Volkswagen AG. Well, we're going to drop off 4 letters.
Well, simplifies.
Yep. Volkswagen would enter the super mini market in 1975 with the Volkswagen Polo, a stylish and spacious 3-door hatchback designed by Bertone. It was a strong seller in West Germany and most of the rest of Western Europe, being one of the first foreign small cars to prove popular in Britain. It had started out in 1974 as the Audi 50, which was only available in certain markets and was less popular. The Polo entered this market sector, already being dominated by the Fiat 127 and the Renault 5, which before long would also include the Austin Metro and the Ford Fiesta, what my mom and dad have.
Yeah.
In '81, the second generation Polo would launch as a hatchback, resembling a small estate car, and in '83, the range was expanded with the introduction of a coupe. There was also a classic, a two-door saloon. The Polo's practicality, despite the lack of a five-door version, helped ensure even stronger sales than its predecessor. It continued to sell well after a makeover in 1990, finally being replaced by an all-new version in 1994. It arrived in 1981. We're the second generation of the larger Passat and the second generation of the Volkswagen Scirocco Coupe. In 83, an MK2 Golf was launched. At the beginning of 1988, the third generation Passat was the next major car launch. Volkswagen did not produce a hatchback version of this Passat, despite the rising popularity of hatchback body style throughout Europe. After launching the B3 Passat, Volkswagen launched the Corrado, analogous to the Scirocco, although the Scirocco remained in production until 1992. A third generation of the Scirocco was in production from 2008 to 2017. Now, Volkswagen would launch the third generation Golf in 91, which became the European car of the year for 92. The Golf MK3 and Jetta MK3 would arrive in North America in 93. The sedan versions of the Golf was badged Vento in Europe, but remained Jetta in the United States. The Scirocco and later Corrado were both Golf-based coupes. In 1994, Volkswagen unveiled the J. Mays designed Concept 1, a retro-themed concept car with a resemblance to the original Beetle, based on the platform of the Polo. Due to positive response to the concept, a production version was developed of the new Beetle based on the Golf's larger platform. In 1995, a Sherahan was launched in Europe, the result of a joint venture with Ford, which also resulted in the Ford Galaxy and the Seat Alhambra. The company's evolution of its model range was continued with the Golf MK4, introduced at the end of 1997, or North America 1999, and its chassis spawned a host of other cars with the Volkswagen Group: the Volkswagen Bora, the Seat Toledo, Seat Leon, Audi A3, Audi TT, the Skoda Octavia, and other main models during that decade include the Polo, a smaller car than the Golf, and the larger Passat for the segment above the Golf. Well, in 1998, the company launched the new Lupo city car, and in 1999, they announced the first 3-liter car, a lightweight version of the Lupo, which would travel 100 kilometers with only 3 liters of diesel, making it the world's most fuel-efficient car at the time. Now, further expansions would see the Volkswagen introducing an array of new models after Bernd Pischenreiter became the Volkswagen Group CEO, responsible for all group brands in 2002. You would see the 6th generation of the Golf launched in 2008, come runner-up to the Opel Vauxhall Insignia in the 2009 European Car of the Year, and has spawned several cousins: the VW Jetta, VW Scirocco, Seat Leon, Seat Toledo, Skoda Octavia, and the Audi A3 hatchback ranges, as well as a new mini MPV, the Seat Altea. The GTI, a hot hatch performance version of the Golf, boasts a 2.0-liter turbocharged fuel stratified injection direct injection engine. Sounds very high-tech to me.
Sounds complicated.
The VW began marketing the Golf under the Rabbit name once again in the US and Canada in 2006. The 6th generation Passat and the 5th generation Jetta both debuted in 2005, and Volkswagen announced plans to expand its lineup further by bringing back the Scirocco in 2008. Other models of the Wolfgang Renard's, the Volkswagen brand CEO product offensive, included the Tiguan.
Yay, we got one of those.
Yep. Midsize SUV in 2008, and a Passat Coupe in 2006. Now, Bernd Pischenreiter announced his resignation from Volkswagen Group CEO and was replaced by the Audi worldwide CEO, Martin Winterkorn, at the beginning of 2007. Volkswagen maintained North American sales of 224,195 in 2005, and the momentum continued for fiscal 2006, as Volkswagen's North American sales for the year were 235,140 vehicles, a 4.9% increase over 2005, despite the slump in domestic North American manufacturer sales. 2007, the EOS, a hardtop convertible, was produced in a new facility in Portugal. All Golfs, Rabbits, and GTIs as of 2006 are manufactured in Wolfsburg, Germany, rather than the Puebla, Mexico, where the Golfs and GTIs for North American market are produced. From 1989 to 1998, in the Brazilian factory in Caribbean, where the Golfs and GTIs were produced from 1999 to 2006. The Jetta has been primarily manufactured in Mexico since 1989. Now, Volkswagen is also in the process of reconfiguring an automobile assembly plant in Belgium. The new models and investments in manufacturing improvements were immediately noticed by automotive critics, and favorable reviews of the Volkswagen's newest cars, including the GTI, being named by Consumer Reports as the top sporty car under $25,000, one of Car and Drivers Magazine's 10 Best for 2007, Automobile Magazine's 2007 Car of the Year, as well as the 2008 Motor Trend Comparison, ranking the mid-sized Passat first in its class. Volkswagen would partner with Daimler AG and other companies to market the Blue Tech clean diesel technology in cars and trucks from Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, and other companies and brands. And according to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, 4 of the 10 most fuel-efficient vehicles available for sale in the United States are powered by Volkswagen diesel engines. But that's been a fun little look at our history of the Volkswagen. Like we said, we've got one in our driveway.
Our new car. It's
blue. It's blue.
And it is Volkswagen.
And it's also got a special little feature where it will actually, if you're at a stoplight, it'll shut itself off to save gas.
It also yells at you.
It's a very noisy car. It's also a highly paranoid car because you could walk around the front of it if there's a sidewalk right there. It's like no, don't go forward. Stop. It's a very, 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 very picky car. But, David loves it. It has legroom for him. But we will see you folks next week. And have a good one out there.
Night-night. I know you guys will be watching this in the afternoon, but still, I'm going to bed.